Folks, it's Cine-Geezer Mike here. Cine-Geezer Steve is real busy right now. Lots of good things have been happening with him. But I wanted to tape an interview with the co-author of this book. Here we go. Eleanor Powell, Born to Dance. As you can see, it was written by Paula Broussard and Lisa Royere. And Lisa is going to be coming to Springfield and doing a program, a free program, by the way. Free is always great. A free program all about the life and career of Eleanor Powell. That's coming up May 28th at the Hope Center for the Arts, which is in downtown Springfield, the former City Stage building. You guys know where that is. And doors open at 6. The program begins at 7. It goes until 8:30. And she's going to be talking about this daughter of Springfield. Eleanor Powell was born here and actually started her dance career here by taking lessons here. Powell was an absolutely amazing dancer. And I don't think any greater testimony to her skills and to her athleticism can come from anyone other than Fred Astaire, who didn't ever want to dance with her again because, as he told her, "You're better than me." So Eleanor Powell was a tremendous entertainer, and we're going to be talking to Lisa in this episode about the program. Again, May 28th, Hope Center for the Arts. Get there starting at 6 o'clock, and it's free. So that's what this issue of Cine-Geezers is all about. So stay tuned for a great talk with Lisa all about Eleanor Powell. Lisa, I want to thank you very much for consenting to do an interview here. Your book, I'll hold it up to the camera, but don't worry, there we go. Your book is really, really good. And what I really liked about it is you did what I do. I'm right now writing a book about Richard and Alex Gordon, who were two British brothers, movie crazy kids who came here in 1947 because their dad said, if you want a career in the movies, you got to come to America. And both of them wound up producing a lot of stuff. I was lucky enough to become friends with both of them, especially Richard. And I thought this was a good time for the book because most of their films are now on streaming channels. So people can actually see them. And I know a lot of Eleanor's movies were released on DVD. And I'm certainly going to scout out trying to get a few more of them. I have the one that she did with Astaire, and I can't remember which Broadway melody, what year that since she did several with Broadway melody, what that is.
That one was 1940, Broadway Melody of 1940.
So I always think it's great to be able to say to readers, okay, it's great to read about what we have to say, but it's even better for you to discover the artistry of a particular person in movies. So I'm going to be all over the place here because I got a bunch of questions, but you knew Eleanor Powell, right?
Yes, I did
How
very
did that
well.
come about?
Well, I was really young. It was just after I had seen That's Entertainment. I had a dance background and I didn't really care for tap dancing as I knew it. And so I went to see this movie, That's Entertainment. If you remember, it has film clips from all of the great MGM musicals. And I kept seeing this lady and I was like, wow, she's tapping like I've never seen before. Who is that? I said to my friend. She said, that's Eleanor Powell. And there were about 3 clips in the film, and I did it this every single time I had the same reaction. So I thought, wow, I'd really love to meet her and talk to her and so there was a series of hit and misses where she'd be someplace and I'd just miss her. And so finally, they were having a Eleanor Powell film retrospective at this little old hole in the wall theater in Hollywood. And I went and I talked to the manager and I said, thank you so much for showing these films because at the time you couldn't see them anywhere. And he said, oh, no problem. And I said, I wish I could meet her someday. And he said, oh, she was here last night. And I said, oh no. And he said, well, don't worry, because next week we're having a birthday party for her and she's coming back.
Wow.
So I went to the birthday party and I met her and we started talking and we must have talked for half an hour. And she immediately said, you need to come over to my house. I have some film clips to show you. And so we just became friends and actually pretty close. She was like a second mother to me, a
Wow.
really special, special woman.
Well, a lot of people read Hollywood stories, and a lot of Hollywood stories. And what I liked about your book is that you stripped away a lot of the PR crap, and you're actually talking about real events and real things that was in her life. Um,
Mhm,
we read about people and how they were treated by the studios. Um, and one thing I liked about your book is that you really went into how she operated at MGM and the sifting, the shifting sands, I should say, that w was her employment at MGM and
mhm,
how she was treated is I found it fascinating is that she wanted to learn how movies worked.
mhm,
She became friends with, you note in her book, with all the guys, the grips,
mhm,
the camera operators. Um, they were supportive of her because she actually paid attention to them and that she
mhm.
wanted to know how things work. That impressed me a great deal. The other thing that you put in that impressed me enormously was that she had the clout, at least for a while, to do her own choreography, to work with the set designers, the production
Mhm.
designers, and they let her do that. And
Well, I want to say for the choreography, she kind of had to because nobody else could do what she was doing.
sure,
But there was a choreographer on set, for the background people, for the chorus and stuff. But she always did. Yes, she conceived the number from the very beginning, worked with the set designer to make it come to pass, and sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't always meet her specifications, but. Yeah, she did her choreography, and people didn't know that for years and years and years. They think that somebody else did it, but she had that innovation that was super rare at the time, especially for a woman.
well, you always read about Fred Astaire having the collaboration with Hermes Pan, for instance. And then you
Mm-hmm.
always read about someone like a director like Busby Berkeley, who was in charge basically of how his movies looked from the dance perspective and other
Hmm.
perspectives as well. So it was a revelation to me that basically they allowed her to work things out, which meant that she could play to her strengths. She could also
Hmm.
try different kinds of things because
Hmm.
I don't think anyone, at least initially, was telling her what to do. Um,
No. No, in fact, she felt like she had to come up with all these novel ideas with each movie. She was doing crazier and crazier stuff. She was dancing jumping rope. She was jumping on drums. She was dancing with a dog. And at the end, she was roping. And she learned from a real cowboy
I
how to
saw that.
rope.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty
Um,
impressive.
I haven't seen it yet. Sorry. I was busy reading your book and writing my own. But I bought a copy of the last film that she did, the independent film that was released through United Artists.
Oh.
And I understand that and I haven't watched it yet, but I read that she's a pinball in a huge pinball machine.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the concept of the number. By the way, that was not her favorite film. It's not one of her best, but it's kind of interesting. It's better to see the other stuff first.
Well,
But
yes, yeah. And
just for anybody
unfortunately,
who
the
who
print that is on YouTube of it and the print that I bought, obviously it was a reissue print in 16 millimeter from Astor Pictures.
Mhm.
It's watchable. Um, I've seen worse quality, but at the
Mhm.
same time, yeah, it's sort of like Well, this was certainly not up to her MGM standards in terms of the production, but I would say
No.
that she was one of these persons that was going to give it 100% no matter what. She
Yep, that's
was not a
her.
performer who, forgive the pun, walked through a role. I mean,
Hmm.
she was there to work and be as perfect as she could.
Yes, that's true. You nailed it. She was one of the hardest workers in Hollywood. And in that movie, she dances with a horse. So it's not uninteresting. It's okay.
Right. I'm also a huge W.C. Fields fan, and that was the
Oh
last
yeah, and he's in that
he
too.
ever did. And he was
Right.
not a well man when he did that. But
Hmm.
um, like Powell, he came from a background of being a trooper, of
Hmm.
wanting to perform and wanting to work. Um,
Yeah.
Another thing about your book that was fascinating to me was the relationship with Fred Astaire and how Fred Astaire viewed Eleanor Powell. Um, is it fair to say it wasn't jealousy, but there was an element of personality that stood between them, maybe being closer as friends, much less potential coworkers?
I think Fred was he was a perfectionist, so was Eleanor, but he had, for somebody who was such a star, um, as he had really not a lot of self-confidence. We found a letter in one of the archive files that he had written. I think we mentioned it in the book. He wasn't satisfied with the way he was looking. He wasn't satisfied with his height. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. And so he wasn't really at ease. And I'm not sure that that was ever the case for anything, but with her, they were friendly. And in the beginning, it was kind of formal, and they had to break through that to be able to work together. And both of them choreographed their numbers in that film. But toward the end, I think he never wanted to work with her again because it was exhausting. I mean, they did something like 8 numbers in that film, and they had to work and work and work, and they were exhausted by the end. And he knew, I think somebody like Ginger Rogers showed him to his advantage more. It was more of what people were expecting after. I think they had done 7 films by that time together. Their partnership was ending, and this just was not the same thing at all.
Well, that begin the begin sequence in that film is pretty effing remarkable.
Yes.
And she always has that big, broad smile on her face. It's like this, she makes it, well, he does too, because I admire Astaire. I think he was an
Mhm.
incredible performer. But she makes it look like she's enjoying this. And I know it's work that's so physically beyond anything, even in my youth, that I could possibly even conceive
Mhm.
of.
Mhm.
Nonetheless, she makes it look like she's happy doing it. She's enjoying the experience. And do you think she was? Do you think,
Yes, I do. I think she's famously said, "I'd rather dance than eat," and I totally believe that. She worked so hard, her feet could be bleeding, she could lose toenails and other gross things that would happen, but she gave it her all and she loved it. The movement did something to her, and that was the way she expressed herself. That was who she was. So I believe the smile was genuine.
in your book, you talk a lot about the things that she did at MGM or that MGM thrust upon her to make her a better performer, like singing
Hmm.
lessons, for one thing,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
her time on the Broadway stage and in vaudeville didn't really require her to sing or to act. And she took acting lessons as well. Um, in what I've seen of her, I thought that she was absolutely fine on film in terms of non-dancing scenes. I mean, she comes across as
Well, she wasn't the greatest, strongest actress, but I think she had a little flair for comedy that was beginning to develop with the films with Red Skelton.
hmm
And that was really fun to see. And also, she had a talent for mimicry. In Broadway Melody of 1936, she mimics Katharine Hepburn and does a really good job. And apparently, she could do a really good imitation of Jimmy Stewart, but they, I guess, never let her do it in a film, but she did it on stage. And as for the singing, she did sing a little bit. When you're on Broadway, you do sing. She sang in Fine and Dandy, one of her first roles that she had in 1931. And so she was used to singing, but MGM had so much writing on this film with this unknown person that they were presenting that they decided to dub her voice. And what's ironic is when Broadway Melody of 1936, her first big film, opened in New York, across the street was playing At Home Abroad, in which she was a cast member and singing. And then she had a radio show that ran for like 39 weeks. She didn't make it for all of it because she sort of had a nervous or exhaustion collapse. But she was singing on the radio every week. She was singing in the Broadway show and she was dubbed in her movie.
Wow. Wow.
It was too bad. And then she finally did get to sing a few movies later in Rosalie. That was the first time you hear her voice on film. And then after that, she sang, but not a lot. I mean, she had a pleasant voice, but MGM, they had to do everything bigger and better. And
Right. Right. After reading your book, sometimes I have to admit I wondered that if her path had led her to another studio than MGM, if she would have had a longer career on film, or if she would have had a career that was a little bit, a little bit. I'm grasping for the words, controlled, because MGM was all about control of
Mm,
its stars, of its performers. Um, I really wonder, what if she wound up at Universal? What if she was at Paramount? Maybe, because I think it was sad to me to read basically how MGM sort of started pushing her out. They started making decisions that would uh, lessen her time on the screen, lessen the
hmm
type of movie that she had originally been in. Um,
hmm
and I have to admit, I've not seen the Red Skelton pictures. I don't know if they're even available on DVD.
Yeah, everything is now,
They are?
fortunately.
Okay.
Yeah,
Then
everything. Yeah,
I'll pick
yeah,
up a couple of those
yeah.
because I really do want to see them. Um, and while I know that wasn't necessarily from the public's point of view a demotion, I get the sense reading your book that she was really starting to question whether or not she had a future at MGM.
That's exactly right. Yes, she considered it sort of a demotion. She would tell about Ship Ahoy was the first movie that she made with Red Skelton. And at the time, he was an up and coming radio star. And he was really, there was a lot of comedy on radio at that time. And he was becoming really, really popular. So MGM, of course, sees the opportunity to promote him to star level because he had been in a couple movies before, and I think he was in one called Whistling in the Dark,
Right.
and he made a really good impression on the audience. So they did that. And then Bert Lahr ended up in that movie too. And she was supposed to do this big number with her bullfighting number. She did it, but it was conceived in a better manner. And she had this whole scenario that was in her head. And the executive said, "Oh, we need to cut that. Would you give a rising comic a hand?" And you put it like that. She's so nice that she said, "Of course." But then the movie, you see, there's a number with not a number, but a routine with Red Skelton and Bert Lahr, and they're in a cellar and they're trying to get out and they're climbing on these barrels and they're drunk. And that was what replaced what she was supposed to do. And it was really discouraging for her because, well, her numbers were big, her numbers were expensive, with building the sets and everything that went into them, recording the music and the time. So I don't know, And things were changing as far as dance goes too. Tap was not exactly out, but other styles of dance were coming in. And you see the whole Freed unit, all the movies with Gene Kelly and everything at that era just is not the same as what she did.
I would venture to guess, though, that if given the opportunity, that she would have certainly learned new styles. If they said, okay, we want to decrease the tap, but we want to
Hmm.
increase this, because as you point out in your book, I mean, she came, tap was not her first choice in terms of dance.
Not at
And
all.
it was only because she saw that tap dancers were getting attention, were being featured, that she said, okay, I need to learn this. So she really
Hmm.
came across to me as someone who was examining what was going on. She wanted to fit in with trends in entertainment. And that's why
Hmm.
it bothered me when I read this about her at MGM in the last few films. It's like, just give her the chance to do what you think now the audiences want, and she will
Hmm.
deliver. But
Hmm.
she never really got that chance.
No. And I can't help but wonder if it's partly because she was a woman and she was getting older, and it doesn't, in Hollywood, if you're a man like Fred Astaire, you can be like 60 years old or 55 or something, dancing with a young Leslie Caron who's 20, and it doesn't make any difference, but it doesn't work the other way around. People don't like to see older women, you know, um, that's the way they are or were.
Um, the chapters that talk about her life after the film ended, after the films ended, it was
Hmm.
interesting. She threw herself really into her marriage and being a mom with the same kind of
Hmm.
fervor that she did dance. And she
Hmm.
was obviously very serious about this. At the same time, though, I mean, she pursued these dance opportunities in live venues because she needed the money.
Hmm.
Uh, but I was always struck, like, in Hollywood, a lot of women in her position would have hung on somehow, you know?
Hmm.
Um, like Kay Francis, who was the goddess at Warner Brothers for years,
Hmm.
wound up after Warner's forced her out. I mean, she was doing movies for Monogram. She
Hmm.
wasn't going to quote go away all the way. But I got the sense with Eleanor Powell, it was like, again, she wanted to control her destiny, and I think she felt, this is my guess, you tell me if I'm wrong, that she felt more comfortable doing these live events than relying once again on a studio, putting the fate of her career into the hands of a studio.
I think she didn't want to commit to a contract because, they always tended to have longer term contracts. She did a guest spot in 1950 in the Esther Williams film called Duchess of Idaho.
Right.
And Joe Pasternak was the producer, and he was like, "Oh, come back, Ellie. We're going to give you a contract. We want you to do more." And she was gorgeous. She was in color in that film, and she looked fabulous, and she danced just as well as, she had in the beginning. She was still doing everything that she did. And she could have done that, but she walked away because she had her priorities, and that was being a mom and raising Peter and supporting Glenn.
Television, I mean, you detail that she did some TV,
Hmm.
um, and she got good reviews for the
She
TV.
got 5 Emmys for the TV show.
Well, she
Yeah.
did. Okay, so she got the Emmys for her religious children's broadcasting, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah, that's
you mentioned that she was on the NBC All-Star
oh,
Review, for instance, with
yes.
Danny Thomas,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
she got good reviews for that. She got good reviews for being on Perry Como's show.
Hmm.
Um, Besides the religious programming, which clearly she was very into and was very successful with, was she offered permanent? Did someone want her to do a series or be a part of a series on
Yeah,
TV?
so those two things are in different time periods. The 52 one with Danny Thomas, that was before she was doing her live shows, but that was before her comeback. She did have a big comeback in 1961, and that's when she went on Perry Como show.
Okay.
And at that time, I think there was a question of her doing a special with Fred Astaire, but it never for some reason never worked out. I don't think she was offered a regular spot like many of the stars were at that time. Um, she could have been a really good
Right.
hostess, but
Yeah. She probably could have done her own talk show or talk variety show.
oh yeah, she could talk. She would have been great at that.
The sad part of the book is, of course, the personal stuff with Glenn Ford.
Hmm.
Um, I had read a little bit about Glenn Ford. Frank Capra's book about his career. He talks about doing one of his last films with Glenn Ford, which was, oh gosh, I can't remember the title, but it was a remake of one of his 30s films about
There's
an
a
older.
pocket full of miracles with
There
Betty
we go,
Davis.
Pocket Full of
Yeah.
Miracles, which was a remake of Lady for a Day back
Yes,
in the
yes.
1930s.
Hmm.
And Capra hated Glenn Ford. Wrote at fair length about how unreasonable he was to work with, and Capra found that his authority was being usurped by him, and that Capra didn't like Hope Lang either, who was the lead in the picture, and just referred to her as, perhaps unfairly, just as Glenn Ford's girlfriend.
Hmm.
But Ford does not come off very well at all in Capra's book, and in your book, he was just abusive to Eleanor.
He was.
But yet, it seems, based on what you guys wrote, is that toward the end of their lives, she could view him as a friend, and that they could have friendly conversations, especially about their son.
Hmm. What I was going through my old letters from her because we wrote a lot too, even though we lived like a mile away from each other. But she was saying, "Oh, I've got to go babysit Aubrey because Peter and Linda are going to Glenn's wedding." So I thought that was so odd,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was like his third, fourth, I don't know. He kept trying again, but. And she was very matter of fact about it. She was hurt by their time together, and that never fully went away, but she was able to reconcile herself to it, I guess. But
Oh,
she never married again.
and ultimately, even though her her film career was relatively short as compared to other people,
Hmm.
um, she stayed in the public eye. She was celebrated for her talent. Even
Hmm.
as she grew older, um, it was clear that people really respected her and liked her. I also appreciated the comments about her coming back to Springfield, appearing at Storyton Theater, uh,
Hmm.
which of course no longer exists. The theater
Hmm.
went the way of all summer theaters did. Um, I did not see her there. I saw other people there, but somehow I was still in high school, and I wasn't attuned to these movie things as
Hmm.
I should have been, because I would have loved to have seen her perform. I'd love to see her there. Um, I did see Ruby Keeler in No No Nanette there.
Oh, she was fabulous.
Um, and I
Not,
thought actually she was better at that point in her life than she was in her Warner Brothers movies.
oh, I agree with you 100%.
Maybe I don't know, maybe it just aged, her talent aged better, but um, it sounds like Eleanor had quite a response from Springfield in terms of coming back, that people made a big deal about it, which I think is great.
Did you know that they had an Eleanor Powell Day? It was June 11th, 1964, and she got the key to the city. Mayor Ryan gave her the key. She had this tour of the city, followed by photographers, and then they had a parade down Main Street.
Well, I wish I had known that when I interviewed Mayor Ryan. I knew Mayor Ryan pretty well. I've got a show on our channel called Government Matters, and we had him in reminiscing about his career in politics. Mayor Ryan lived into his 90s and
Hmm.
was sharp as a tack up until the moment he passed. But yes,
Hmm.
I'm very glad that Springfield did that. Because, and I'm very glad that you're coming to Springfield to talk about that because I really want people to know her work. In this era of streaming and this era where the irony is that classic motion pictures are sometimes much more difficult to see than a low budget horror movie on Tubi. But if you want to see something with a bit more substance, it is a little bit more difficult these days.
Hmm.
So I really I'm hoping that part of what can be accomplished by your appearance in Springfield is that people will say, I'm going to find her. I want to take a look. I like dancing. I like, you know, um, and she was just, I was trying to think of other people, and I'm sure because you're into dance and film that you'll be able to help me out. Other than like Ginger Rogers in the 30s, because Ann Miller didn't come until the 1940s, really.
Well,
Um,
she started at Columbia in maybe 37.
yeah, I know
Ann
she
Miller
was
did.
in one of Frank
Yeah.
Capra's pictures. You can't take it
Mm.
with you.
Yeah, she was in that, but she did some kind of low budget musicals at Columbia too. She did one called Reveille with Beverly. I love the title. And she was pretty good, but you could tell that she um, patterned herself, some of her steps she tried to after Eleanor Powell, who is, of course, the biggest tap dancer. So we have Ruby Keeler, we have Ann Miller a little bit in the 30s, Ginger, of course. And yeah,
Yeah,
those are the biggies.
I was trying to think of the 1930s when she was at Metro, who else was doing the type of things that she was doing.
Oh,
And
nobody at Metro. That's why they
right.
wanted her.
But you did have Ruby Keeler in the early Warner Brothers musicals, and you certainly
Hmm.
had Ginger Rogers with the Fred Astaire musicals. But she really stood out at that time. I mean, it's
Hmm.
and if you care about movie history, you will realize that in many ways she was a groundbreaker
I think so.
for dancing.
Yeah. Considering, as you mentioned, Ruby Keeler came first, then the Astaire and Rogers musicals in chronologically, and then MGM was really late to the game with a really good comeback musical because they had done their Broadway Melody in 1929, and that had all sorts of dancing in it, like not good, but they needed something to compete with those other two studios. And Fox, of course, had Shirley Temple, but that wasn't right away either. I think
Right.
her first big movie was 35, where she
Yeah.
made or 34, maybe. But
Yeah, but I just I look at her films, and after reading your book, I'm going to go back and find more to watch.
mhm.
She really did stand out. She was truly singular in what she was doing. And how I also like the fact that um, and I know Fred Astaire championed this, and I have a feeling she championed it at Metro, which is to show her whole figure, to show her face, but to show her feet. Don't do
Mhm.
cuts like to her feet while they're tap dancing. You know,
Yeah.
it was to show the entire figure. Um, because, Busby Dirk Berkeley in his directing work and choreography at Warner's did that. It was cut, cut,
Hmm.
cut. And you didn't really get to see the individual performing in the way the individual undoubtedly would like you to see him or her.
Hmm.
And
True. Yeah.
and so I really get the sense because she was such a person wanting to know how these things worked and knowing this crew that she wanted a particular look for herself on screen.
Oh, she probably did. At Fox, she made her first she appeared in a film before she came to MGM, and it was just basically she just had this one number, and they did cut away to her feet a couple times during that, and that whole number was it was kind of a disaster because the sound was off like a frame, and when she went to see it in the theaters, she was excited. This is her first, film debut, and she was with her friends, and she was very embarrassed because the sound was off from her tapping, it seemed like to her she was dancing out of time. Now, we probably wouldn't notice it like that, but it is kind of awkward. So at MGM, of course, they had better camera work. The cameramen, I will say that MGM did have a fault that sometimes the frame was too close to the feet, and we could have used a little more space so they didn't get cut off because a tap dancer, you do want to see their feet.
Hmm.
But and yes, she was very particular about what went into the number, and she would sit with the film cutter because she said invariably the film cutter, who's not a dancer, will cut out the most difficult steps and leave the other things. And so she wanted to have a say in that, so she was able to do that, which I thought was really uh, a good choice and just shows how interested she was in
When I
every
read that,
aspect.
I thought, oh my God, this is really remarkable. I mean, she's in the editing room saying to this guy, okay, do this.
Mhm.
That's really singular. A lot of people were not, a lot of performers were not allowed in the editing rooms. Hell, there were directors who weren't allowed in the editing rooms, you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure if anybody else, any other dancer, I've never heard of any other dancer doing that at this time period.
So
So,
I want to end up with this talking about her when you knew her. Um, was she happy with her career? Was she pleased with what she'd been able to accomplish? I get the sense in the book that I think she had a peace of mind about things in her life. Um, I just wonder from you, is that the sense that you got from her?
yes, I think she was. Of course, any dancer is going to look at what she's done and say, "Oh, I wish I could do that again. I probably could do that better." But she wasn't overly critical. We watched film clips together, and she was really happy to have to see young people, and especially at the Gary Theater where we first met her. There was a whole group of college kids who came, and for her, that was so validating to see that young people appreciated her work. And one of the reasons we did the book is that we wanted to present her as a dancer, to present her work so it wouldn't be forgotten, but also to present her as a person so that she would be known because she felt like people didn't really know her. And it's true, she fell out of, well, she never attained the status for some reason of an Astaire or Kelly when she was every bit as good, if not better.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you for having me. I
We're looking
appreciate it.
forward to having you come to Springfield. Uh,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.